Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. And today we are back again with yet another episode of Breaking into InfoSec with Cloud Security. And today we have a very dear friend, Ashish Rajan, and he's amazing around cloud security and podcast and whatnot. But I will let him speak about himself and introduce himself. So over to you, Ashish.
Thank you. Thanks, Vandana, for having me. And I think it's really kind of you to invite me as well. And I am looking forward to this conversation. I think it's going to be a fun one. For people who don't know me, my name is Ashish. I am a host of Cloud Security Podcast, which is a weekly podcast that live streams every week on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and a lot of places. It was basically a pandemic thing. I'm not going to go into details of it, but it's basically every week I talk to an expert in cloud security and kind of share that knowledge. Outside, that's my non 9 to 5. When I'm working my 9 to 5, I'm a CISO for a tech company with a global office. And yeah, I've been in cybersecurity for almost 15 years. Although 7 in cloud, which sounds like maybe make me sound like a veteran, because just before this call started, we were talking about how DevRel is a new thing that's never existed. Same way, cloud is only like less than 10 years old. So if anyone asks you 15 years of experience in cloud, there is no one like that. Unless the person has created the cloud, they were never there. So that's a brief introduction about me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ashish. And Ashish, we do want to know that what cloud security means to you and what is cloud security? Like you and I have been working on it, but let's say if I am a student who has no background on it, so what cloud security is for them?
Sure, it's a great answer. And I think maybe a good place to start this would be why cloud in the first place and why people talk about cloud and cloud security. So the best way to explain this is, especially for students who may be listening this, a lot of people who have been in the industry, kind of like Vandana and me, who've been doing data center security for a long time. Every time people talk about cybersecurity, they always used to think about, hey, it's either AppSec or it's something called like a network firewall security or one of those ones. They would never think about, say, we should make things easier. So over the last 6-7 years, as I was saying earlier, a lot of people started migrating towards cloud. And the reason they did that is because in our old world, or where Vandana and I kind of started our cybersecurity career, if we wanted a server, we had to wait for at least 3-4 months before we could get a server. And that used to be a pain. Imagine you want to build the next Facebook, but you go and buy a server. They say, oh, you have to wait for 5 months before you can get the server. And you're like, but there is another person who probably has the same idea and they can come out with it very quickly. So the cloud kind of gave the opportunity to people where they can request a hardware and get that same hardware as Facebook, like the same scale within 5 minutes and at any region in the world. Like, so you could be in India, but you could host a service in the US, in Australia. You could become a global startup from that point. So that kind of was like the cloud and why cloud. Now, cloud security, the simplest way to explain it is securing workload and application on cloud. Now, depending on who you talk to, you may talk to an application security person. They talk about application security in cloud, which is true as well. If you talk to a person from an infrastructure background or a sysadmin background, they talk about cloud security as, hey, it's about infrastructure security. My cloud security posture, how does that look like? So to me, the simplest definition would be everything that you have from a company perspective in the assets in the cloud. That's what cloud security is. Nowadays, the SaaS security is kind of coming in. I'm not going to go into it, but that's kind of slowly creeping into it as well. But for the moment, you're safe. That's what cloud is, cloud security.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree with you on that. And let's say if someone is coming from a different background and they want to be part of cloud security, now they understand cloud because they have worked on it from a different perspective. So how can actually they be part of cloud security? Because this itself is something which is a niche area, right?
Yep. I think it's a good question. And the easiest way to answer this is you would be surprised how many people don't actually have the experience of cloud and are doing cybersecurity jobs. So I'll probably take this in two separate ways. One is if you're already in an organization which has cloud, I would be more than surprised if your security team has a good handle on cloud security. So the easiest thing for you to would be if you just reach out to them and ask about, hey, what do you guys do for cloud security? And it's as simple as asking, do we do audit logging? How do we do that? Do you know if I log in from my home IP versus my work IP? Like it's about putting that hat on and going, how do I provide value to the security team? And that's one way I found you get to know scenarios which are specific to your job and your company. That's the easiest way, right? So forget about certification and everything. That's the easiest way. If you already work in cloud, that's the easiest way to get into it. Now, the other way, if you don't have the opportunity and maybe you don't have the security team, I've come across examples where people have kind of started building security practices themselves, where they start doing security activity within their companies and become that known cloud security person where, hey, we should go, if Vandana was that person, so, oh, we should go to Vandana because I think she knows much about cloud security because she's been doing this thing like a project he talks about. I'm sure she knows what to do about it. The third thing is if you are probably in a company, maybe you have heard about cloud, you've done some certifications in cloud, and you're trying to get that cloud security role. The easiest way I've found it is to give the understanding of you have some idea about cybersecurity. A certification has kind of becomes valuable at that point. Now, whether you take the AWS security certification or any of the Azure, Google Cloud certification, that could be a good way to kind of start having conversations with potential employers if you don't have current opportunity in your existing workplace.
That's a very, very relevant point because I've been seeking these kind of inputs for a very long time, wherein there are multiple ways to learn some subject, especially looking at different aspects. And we tend to look at one aspect and just go with that and then get lost in what to do next. But yeah, looking at these multiple aspects can really, really help. And especially now, then that knowledge is available freely. You can just go anywhere and look for it.
As I think I would definitely recommend people check out some of your other videos that you've done on your YouTube channel as well, because I think it's definitely worthwhile knowing because cloud security could not be like it is probably the best thing for me, but may not be the best thing for you who are listening in. It may be bug bounty, it may be developer rel, it could be something else. So it's okay to feel the pressure that, hey, cloud seems to be, everyone's talking about cloud, but it's okay if you think, oh, I'm more of a DevRel person, I'm not a cloud security person. It's okay for you to kind of go down that path as well.
Yeah. And this one question that always goes in my brain is what is your view around certifications? Like, we should do it, we shouldn't do it. And if we should do it, what are the relevant certifications which can actually bring the real knowledge rather than just a tick mark on our CV, or which actually we can keep it on in our kitty when we are moving forward?
I think that's a great question. And I think it's funny. My answer for this has kind of matured over the last 3-4 years. Because initially I used to be anti-certificate. I'm like, why would you pay money for certificate? It's such a waste of money. Do not go for it. But what I realized, because the reality that there are two parts. Like, I think you could be working for a company which is producing an amazing product. You could be working for a consulting company. Now, consulting companies encourage you to do certificates because they have brownie points, for lack of a better word, from the vendor. So if I'm a consulting company that works only in AWS would give me more work if they know that the people that I've hired have AWS certificates, right? So there is a reason why the industry kind of pushes for that kind of, hey, get certificates. Now, there is some reality to it as well, because a lot of organizations don't know who to hire with the cloud specific knowledge. And they might not be like Vandana and me, who have had experience, so we're known in the industry. So we don't have to look for a job. People reach out to us for a job. Like, hey, Vandana, please come work for me because you're amazing, rah, rah. But because you're starting off as a student, you may not have that leverage at the moment, but you may have some leverage in the future. So for the moment, the way I would approach it is definitely having some kind of a cloud certificate to begin with. Unfortunately, none of the cloud service providers have like a really good practical certificate to say, hey, if you do this, you're doing cloud security. They have security certificates, which would tell you how to do security the AWS way or the Azure way or the GCP way. But one that I can tell you right now that when you walk into a company, it's not just the certificates, it's not just security products of AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. There's so much more that you kind of have to work with. You could be working on SOC, security operations. You could be working on vulnerability management. Like, none of that is basically, by the way, provided by any of the cloud service providers. So I would probably say, if you're looking for certificates, take a step back and kind of maybe even go through the playlist that one that you have on your thing, or I think I've got one specifically for cloud. Go for it. See which one hits your mark for, I feel like this is the kind of rule that I want, then pick the certificate you want to go down the path of. Specifically for cloud, definitely checking out the AWS, Azure, Google Cloud, IBM Cloud, Oracle Cloud. They're all very popular these days. And getting one of those certificates is a good beginning to get that first role, because you'll be surprised how many people in cybersecurity still don't have any certificates, and they look for it's quite a low bar for someone to get a cloud security job. If you have a cloud certificate and maybe a degree in cybersecurity, you can totally get a security analyst job easy. I can tell you, because I think we've hired one. I've helped hire a few more as well. And the only qualification that we were looking for, either you have a cybersecurity degree or some kind of cybersecurity experience, and you have an AWS or a Azure or a Google Cloud certificate. Like that's pretty much was the bare line, because a lot of people don't even cross that. So there you go. Hopefully that helps.
Absolutely, that totally helps. And we would also like to tell you that we would be keeping the link to the podcast or the playlist that Ashish has. And I'm sure this list is amazing. You should definitely check that out, especially
Appreciate
around
that.
cloud security. Yeah.
Yep. Appreciate that.
Ashish, one more question around, let's say now I have got into cloud security. Let's say you told me that, okay, these are the things or checkpoints that I have to cross to get a job. Now I am into cloud security. I'm doing it, but what next? Because that always comes in your career, that how exactly the career progression looks like. For example, what are the leadership roles which are there, or maybe individual contributor roles? Like I have led teams as a leader, but then I wanted to be an individual contributor as well. So I've
Yep.
been toggling around both of them. But how exactly the hierarchy looks like, especially in cloud security?
That's a good question. And it's worthwhile calling out because it's only 7 years or 8 years old. There's a very limited kind of job titles that have come across this. So these days, there's a cloud security engineer, senior cloud security engineer, then principal cloud security engineer. But at principal level, you've already gone beyond what any of the cloud certificates would take you. And that's kind of like, at that point, you're not an individual contributor. You're looking at like across the whole company. Um, as a student, you probably start off as an individual contributor. And as you kind of like, if you want to go into that leadership position, I would probably say my personal experience has been having your fingers in all the pies on, or I guess all the dal makhnis, I guess, for lack of a better word, because we're talking to Indian audience, all the variations of dal makhni you can find around yourself, which means you could be trying to get involved in vulnerability management. You could try and get involved in application security, compliance. So for any leadership position, I always find that the one thing that people look for is what's your understanding across the business. It's not just about, hey, Ashish does really well with cloud security. He knows AWS, he knows GCP, but he doesn't even know what we sell as a company. Then what's the point of making him a senior? Because he's a great individual contributor. He can make amazing tools. He can make amazing cloud security things happen. But when I introduce him to other managers who are his peer or her peer in the same company, who are at a leadership position, how is he going to explain what does the security team do when you can't explain, hey, we have this vulnerability management project. You may be working on creating the next Facebook. We should work together. Rah, rah, rah. So I probably would say those leadership roles haven't really changed. They're still the same. I definitely find that at the moment when people talk about cloud security jobs, they talk about cloud security engineer and there's cloud security architect, there's a senior, and at that principal level, they're primarily the same thing. You can keep becoming a senior cloud security architect for a while, or keep doing that for a while. There's still a great job. You get involved in a lot of individual great projects. But if you're looking for that leadership, then you kind of have to kind of start involving yourself in projects which are just not cloud security projects, maybe hosted in cloud, but using vulnerability management or application security or something or the other. So hopefully that answers the question.
It does answer my question. And one thing I also want to know about around the CVs. Now, when I got everything, but if let's say I'm applying for a job, so Ashish has opened up a rec and he wants to see some CVs or resumes. So what would he actually look into a CV when you're looking for a position around cloud security? Now, there's so much in the cloud, Azure, AWS, GCP, IBM, Oracle, VMware, and whatnot. But what
Yep.
specifically you will look for in a person who can come from any of the cloud workings or who has worked in any of these clouds?
Yeah, actually, that's a great question because it's funny. I did a YouTube short on this recently because there are two parts to this as well. Funny enough, one is if I'm applying for a job and for Ashish's this fictitious company and fictitious role, one thing I would need to be certain of if he's in an AWS environment, I'm going to give more preference to an AWS environment, like AWS certificate or Azure, or just depending on where I am. For me, looking at an Azure certificate is a second preference if I'm on AWS, because well, I'm already running on AWS. Yes, you can learn Azure as well, but if he or she already had AWS, that'll be amazing. So one aspect is if you already know whether you're connected with someone with the company and on LinkedIn, you know if someone they have AWS, Azure, or Google Cloud, having one of those certificates in your resume is definitely a top thing I would I guess look for. Or you work in an organization currently which already has that a reputation for working in that space. So when you kind of describe what you do in your job description, you kind of talk about, hey, I've been working in AWS, I did this, I did that. Now, bringing another lens to this, where if you are a complete newbie, like a fresh starter, like a fresher, as they call them, and you want to apply for a cloud security role, I normally recommend people go for AWS certificate. And the reason I say that is because AWS probably has the longest run for any cloud service provider. And that also means that they probably had the most customers at some point. So everyone who went to cloud first has some presence in AWS. They might have chosen to step away from it or reduce the exposure in it, but they still have a version of AWS somewhere. So if you do AWS, you definitely increase your chances of getting a job because there are that many people who are on AWS and looking for people who would know AWS. But I guess if you go by, there's a report that came out by HashiCorp where they were talking about multi-cloud as well, because a lot of providers have started going multi-cloud. And especially the bigger companies, they're all multi-cloud. It would be surprising if any company out there is not multi-cloud or at least about to be multi-cloud or about to be hybrid. So I would definitely go choose if you don't have any experience, choose AWS certificate, then other things. Or the third option is look for what kind of jobs are coming up in, because there is a call out because India only has one region. And depending on where you are listing this from, you need to be careful from a data sovereignty perspective. Like there would be a lot of companies which would not put their data in a particular cloud service provider like an AWS, Azure, if there is no data center. Like for example, this is for the Indian audience, but a lot of people may work in Dubai, but you'll be surprised, or Dubai or maybe Saudi Arabia, but Saudi Arabia only has Oracle Cloud. It doesn't have AWS, doesn't have Azure, doesn't have Google Cloud. And that makes you go, why would I do and apply for an AWS certificate there? I would apply for an Oracle certificate over there. So having that kind of awareness through different reports is pretty good as well, because you may be surprised based on the region that even though cloud sounds like it's really big, it still hasn't been able to cover the world. Let's just say that. So that would be my advice.
Yeah, I think that's a very relevant advice because when you are working on something, you will be going via that rather than thinking of something else. Yep, absolutely. Now, before we part ways, I do want to ask you if you can share any podcast. Like, we will look at your podcast because I love it and it's amazing. It's totally amazing. But anything, let's say you were telling about playlist or anything that you can recommend it to people, or a newsletter, book that people should look at, or a talk even.
Yeah, 100%. So I guess depending on the technical level that people have, if you are starting off, I think it's funny. I had recently helped someone. She was transitioning into a technology field from a non-technology field. And what I found helpful was we started this thing called Cloud Security News. And the idea was, because she obviously wanted to get into cloud security. And the idea there was just being around conversations and what do people look for when they think about cloud security news. Like the Google Chrome thing that happened a couple of days ago, at least from at the time of this conversation being recorded, that's affecting a lot of cybersecurity people being asked questions, hey, what do I do with it, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't really affect cloud security technically because it's not really relevant. So a cloud security news would not cover that. So I think having yourself surrounded by other peers in the industry who are talking about cloud security, whether it's on Twitter. If you have hashtag cloud security, that definitely has a lot of Twitter for information there as well. Obviously, you can follow Cloud Security Podcast as well, if you like, which is a podcast that I run on a weekly basis. And we've been running for 2 years. And I think we've covered every topic that I can think of under cloud. But if you think of a topic, I would love to hear if I've missed out on a topic. But I normally find that when you go to a cloud service provider, you usually get a bit of a biased opinion. And it's usually catered more for, hey, you should totally go AWS. Stop looking at Azure. It's like, why would you even look at Azure? So I would probably say the easiest way to go about doing this is relying on bloggers or people like Vandana who shares information, or other people who are in the industry who are sharing it. Like I think Tanya Jenkins is a great person as well who talks about AppSec. She's doing Azure security as well. I rely mostly on the so there's a guy named Scott Piper who shares a lot of information about AWS security. There's Marco has a cloud security newsletter list. And there is a TLDR sec as well, which is run by Clint Gibbler. His newsletter also has a lot of information about cloud security. But what I would definitely say, depending on whether you want to go down the technical route, then go for Clint Gibbler as well as Marco's cloud security list. If you're looking more for, or even Scott's pretty good as well. He keeps it very neutral. But if you want to like more of a broader information about cloud security, because we're talking about everyone wants to go to that seniority, you can check out either Cloud Security News, Cloud Security Podcast, or just refer to the blogs, and specifically to the use cases that are shared by the cloud service provider, especially if you go to their conference YouTube pages where they have customers coming in telling, hey, this is how I used AWS, or this is how I used Azure, this is how I used Google Cloud. I think Google Cloud Next is going to happen in the next week or this week or something. That's another great place. So keep an eye out for events, because that's where people like Vandana, me, and other people come and talk about how we are using cloud the real way, not the way the cloud provider tells you. So hopefully that would be helpful.
Absolutely. And all the information you shared is so much more relevant. Thank you so much, Ashish, for sharing all the wonderful insights and actually coming on the podcast. It's amazing to have you.
Not a problem. Thanks so much for inviting as well. I'm glad I was able to provide value, and I'm look forward to connecting with yourself and your audience as well, hopefully. And if anyone wants any cloud security information, definitely feel free to check out Cloud Security Podcast. It's just www.cloudsecuritypodcast.tv, because it is live stream and it happens every week. And I believe the new world of television is live streaming. So I've made that choice. So I'm stuck with it. But I think, I'll enjoy the conversation as well. So I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much. Likewise. Have a great day.
Thank you.